David, Jesse Vang, the boyfriend of Elijah Vue's mother, appearing in court right now for his preliminary hearing surrounding new charges in that case. Vang and Katrina Bauer are charged in the toddler's death. Vang facing 2 felony charges of repeated acts of physical abuse of a child causing death, as well as hiding a corpse. Elijah's body was discovered in September by a person checking their property ahead of hunting season a few miles from Vang's apartment. Jesse Vang's defense attorneys contested his preliminary hearing today, so it forced the state to call witnesses to the stand to prove its case against Vang in order to move forward with the charges in the justice system. The state called a special agent to testify. He described videos, photos, and multiple messages between Vang and Elijah's mother in regards to Elijah's punishment for alleged bad behavior. And due to the nature of these descriptions, Action 2 News choosing not to go into graphic detail, but we've previously reported on the punishment that investigators say that 3-year-old little boy endured while in the care of Vang, allegedly. The defense challenged the physical abuse allegations, arguing there's no evidence to suggest that making a child stand for 1 to 3 hours or repeat phrases endangers their physical health. Nothing discussed in court today so far is new information that wasn't already in the criminal complaint. But the preliminary hearing is continuing at this hour, and we'll continue to keep you updated on this developing story out of Manitowoc County.